Chapter 20 from the official NASA Procedures for Contact with Intelligent Extraterrestrial Life Manual, Contact Beyond Earth. As humanity begins to expand our frontiers, colonizing our moon and Mars and traveling to planets even farther out in our solar system, the possibility exists that our first contact with IEL may not occur on our own planet. Of course, there's also the potential for encountering non-intelligent life on other celestial objects. For example, bacteria and viruses beneath the crust of Mars. But while that would no doubt be an incredible event, it does not require the cautionary procedures laid out in this manual. Should you encounter IEL while not on Earth, DEXA should be contacted immediately. Obviously, many of the steps laid out here will not be feasible beyond Earth, but DEXA can still be extremely helpful in facilitating contact between our species, and perhaps directing the IEL to Earth, where further, more practical communication between our species can take place. The gift. Lunar Day 253, T-minus 3 hours to evacuation. I slept better than I ever had in my previous 252 nights on the moon. Maybe it was because I was exhausted from the extremely long day and all of the time on the lunar surface, and the fact that Lily Schoberg had tried to kill me. Or maybe after 8 months, I was finally getting the hang of lunar sleep, just in time to leave. Whatever the case, I was out cold until my parents shook me awake at 7 a.m.
"Sorry to do this," Mom whispered, "but we have a lot to do today."
And we did. There was still a lot of prep for evacuation, which was more complicated than expected because of the emergency evac we'd done the day before. Our spacesuits, which were still piled by the airlock, all had to be reorganized, cleaned, and examined for damage. There were many more experiments left to break down in the science pod, and there was still equipment to pack. Plus, we were short-handed due to the Schoberg situation. In addition to the evacuation, Nina now had her hands full dealing with Lars and Lily, her two newest criminals. While I had been asleep, NASA had floated the idea of having the Schobergs sent down on the rockets that day instead of my family, so they could be jailed immediately back on Earth. But it was ultimately decided that leaving children in a potentially dangerous moon base, one that had already suffered a life-threatening oxygen leak, while sending criminals to safety would make NASA look bad. Besides, it wasn't as though the Schobergs would end up in jail immediately anyhow. They had more than enough money to post bail back on Earth. For the time being, the best punishment seemed to be to keep them at MBA for as long as possible. Meanwhile, NASA Public Relations was freaking out that they now had to handle an emergency evac and Lily's attempt to murder me. Unlike the Dr. Holtz murder, there was no way to sweep this one under the carpet. Then, Dr. Holtz's death had been proclaimed an unfortunate accident, and Garth Greason, a little-known government employee, had been quietly tried and convicted by a secret tribunal. In contrast, the Schobergs were world famous, and any attempt to bring them to justice was going to be big news. Therefore, what would have been otherwise a chaotic and tense preparation for evacuation was now an extremely chaotic and tense preparation for evacuation. And to my surprise, I found myself feeling a little sad about leaving. The whole time I'd been at MBA, I had never found much to like about it. But now I realized that there were things I would miss. The view through the skylight in the greenhouse, the marathon games of holographic Risk I'd played with Kira, helping Violet do low-gravity gymnastics when Nina wasn't watching, and having conversations in the mess hall with some of the smartest humans alive. True, these were often about how repulsive the food was, but I'd learned some fascinating cutting-edge science as well. I found myself taking any spare moments to wander into the science pod or the gymnasium just to spend a few last minutes there. Zan found me in the greenhouse. Although I'd help uproot most of the plants, Dr. Goldstein had repotted a few to bring back with us, so she could examine them more closely on Earth and study how low gravity had affected them. It wasn't much, but it was still a nice little oasis in the midst of the bustling base. "Hello, Dashiell," Zan said. Although she was smiling and her bright blue eyes were radiant, I got the feeling that she was very sad. "Is something wrong?" I asked. Do you have time to talk? I looked through the glass of the greenhouse into the rest of the base, watching my fellow Moonies bustle about. I'd probably wasted too much time hanging out in there already, but I desperately wanted to speak to Zan. Sure, I said. A little. And then, because I wanted privacy, I had no choice but to exit the greenhouse and cross the hall into the bathroom. Luckily, there wasn't anyone else in there. I slipped into the middle stall and sat down on the space toilet. I wasn't going to miss those things one bit. I'm happy to see that you are all right after yesterday, Zan said. Thanks. It seemed that, since the fate of humanity might be on the line, I should do my best to defend us. Zan, you need to realize that even though people have tried to kill me up here twice, that's not really normal. It's a factor of being up here on the moon, I guess. Space madness or something. All of us living up here in this little confined space where nowhere else to go. I suspected as much. Back on Earth, most kids my age have never even had one attempt on their life. In fact, lots of people never have anyone try to kill them. I know that, but I am actually pleased to have witnessed what I did yesterday. I suddenly understood why Zan seemed so sad. You're not going to help humanity, are you? Zan blinked, surprised. I'm afraid you have things backward. What I saw yesterday convinced me to give you what you need. I sat up, so thrown by this that I couldn't quite make sense of it. But you saw Lily trying to kill me. Yes, however, I am aware that the Schobergs are not normal humans. And in your moment of need, I saw something else more important than Lily's behavior. Cesar Marquez came to your aid, and Violet's, to protect you from Lily. And that surprised you? I have always gotten the impression from you that Cesar didn't like you very much. Right. And yet, when he saw you were in trouble, he came to your rescue without any hesitation, even though that meant he could have ended up in danger too, and others were also rushing to help. Cesar simply got there first. That doesn't strike you as extraordinary. Well, no, I admitted. I mean, I would have done it for Cesar or anyone else. Even the Schobergs. Well, if I saw one of them in danger, yes, I would help them. I wasn't saying it merely to make myself sound good. I really meant it. It seemed that Zan could tell. She smiled warmly. In the galaxy, that behavior is far more unusual than you realize. Of course, species will protect members of their own families, and when a community is at risk from a threat, we will come together to defend it. But it is rare to see a species that is willing to protect random members so readily. So, I said, still trying to comprehend what was going on, you weren't horrified when you appeared to me on the moon yesterday? Not at all. In fact, I was amazed. I know that I have spoken to you many times about the flaws of humanity. It is possible that I have spoken to you far too rarely about the positive aspects. Well, you mentioned music and art, and love. Yes, love. I am still fascinated by how strong the emotional bonds can be between humans. And yet, yesterday showed me that there barely has to be any bond between humans for one to save another. Well, actually, there doesn't have to be any bond at all, I said. My parents have both rescued drowning tourists off the beach in Hawaii, and they didn't know those people. They'd never met them until right then. It's fascinating, Zan said. Your species can be so terrible and brutal to one another, and yet be so loving and kind. I wonder if those two impulses are connected in some way. There is no darkness without light. So you're going to save us? I can't promise that, but I will do my best. If you can avoid wiping yourselves out, you might be just able to be able to teach the rest of us something. I immediately felt as though an enormous weight had been lifted off of me. The stress of having to answer for all of humanity gave way to an incredible feeling of joy. This, combined with the knowledge that I would soon be leaving MBA, was almost overwhelming. I had to fight the urge to leap to my feet and start dancing. if only because I didn't want anyone to find me doing that in the bathroom. And yet I still felt sadness emanating from Zan. This is all good, right? I asked. Of course it is. Then why aren't you happy about it? Because after this, I will never be able to see you again. And just like that, I didn't feel so happy anymore. Well, why not? Some time ago, I told you that there were many of my kind who didn't want me to be in contact with you, and that you were taking a big risk to talk to me. Yes, well, giving this information to you is even riskier, and if you and I remain in contact, they will know I gave it to you. And they'd punish you for it? Yes. How? That's not important. Yes, it is. It's not. There's nothing you could do about it one way or the other, but you can help protect me in the first place. Once I give this to you, you can't share it with anyone for at least 2 of your years. You'll have to keep it a secret. I know that won't be easy, but it is absolutely necessary. I need that time to cover my tracks and conceal any evidence of contact between us. I don't understand. Well, perhaps you will someday, but I don't have the time to explain it to you now. Outside the stall, the door to the bathroom opened. I heard my father's voice. "Dashiell, are you in here?" "Yes," I called out. "We're getting close to time," Dad said. "I know," I replied. "I'm just trying to take care of business before we have to get on the rocket. That zero-G toilet's even worse than this one." "Good point," Dad said. "It's going to be 2 days till the next decent restroom." And then he entered the stall next to me. I tried to return my attention to Zan and ignore the fact that my father was now using the toilet close by, even though I could hear him attaching the various hoses to his body parts. It occurred to me that I should probably really be using the toilet myself rather than just sitting on it, because the zero-G toilets really were more awful than the low-G ones. But things with Zan were even more pressing. I couldn't believe this was going to be the last time I ever saw her. I had always imagined that she would be able to visit me on Earth. I mean, after all, in galactic terms, it wasn't any farther away from her planet than the moon. I had looked forward to showing her my favorite places, having thousands of other conversations with her, and perhaps even learning how to control traveling with my thoughts the way that she did. Or maybe, one day, getting to reveal her existence to the world. But that wasn't going to happen. Now I had mere minutes left with her, if that, and we were stuck in the NBA bathroom of all places, with my father doing his business in the next stall. I felt myself beginning to cry. "I don't want you to go," I told Zan, using only my thoughts. "I don't want to go either. Isn't there some way we can at least meet a few more times? Like, you can't visit me on Earth before giving me this information?" "I wish I could, but I have taken enough risks as it is. Even being with you now is dangerous for me." "It's not fair." "I know. I'm sorry you have to feel this way. To be honest, these emotions that you have, your joy, your love, this sadness, they are very different from what we experience. We care for each other, but in a way that it is much less powerful. I had never felt anything like it until I connected with you." "Even though you connected with Dr. Holtz first?" "Yes, his relationship with me was more scientific, whereas you have love for me, and I have love for you in return." "You do?" "I do, and it is an absolutely wonderful thing. You humans should cherish this feeling. I am so thrilled that I have been able to experience it with you. It is as though you have given me the most amazing gift in the universe, even if it means that I have to feel this terrible sadness too." Zan's image flickered, though in a different way than I'd ever seen before. It appeared that she was losing control of it. The form wavered, and I caught extremely brief flashes of her true self. "Zan, what's wrong? Are you in danger now?" "No, I think I am crying." Crying? I repeated. I had never heard Zan mention doing this before, and from what I had seen, her actual form didn't even seem to have eyes, let alone tear ducts. I'm not doing it the way that you do it, but I am experiencing a physical manifestation of sadness. This has never happened to me before. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, please. It is worth the other feelings I have experienced through you. In the stall next to me, Dad finished his business and hiked up his pants. Dash, you almost done in there? He asked. I just need another minute or so, I said. All right, Dad said, but don't take too much longer. We need you out there. I heard him leave the bathroom and close the door. I think the time has come for me to finish our business as well, Zan said. No, I cried. Yes, I need to go, and all that will come of delaying this is more sadness. Zan took a moment to compose herself. Her avatar reformed, appearing as bright and vivid as usual. Now then, I need you to relax and open your mind to me. All right, I said, and then I did my best to do as Zan had asked. Suddenly, my head was full of information. I had no idea how Zan had done it, but it felt as though I had instantly memorized an encyclopedia. And for a few moments, I was overwhelmed. It was like when you get a brain freeze from eating ice cream too quickly, only in this case, I had learned too much too fast. It left me reeling. I almost fell off the space toilet. Are you okay? Zan asked. I steadied myself and focused. There was a jumble of numbers in my head, but when I concentrated, I began to see connections between all of them. I didn't understand it, but I recognized that there was an order to the chaos and that somehow I had it all memorized. I've got it, I said. Zan seemed relieved. In a sense, she had shifted the burden of this information to me. But her sadness also deepened, and now I understood why. Don't go, I said. I have to, she replied. Nina Stack suddenly came over the MBA intercom system. Attention all lunar nauts, she began, as if perhaps there might be someone else to speak to at MBA. It is T-minus 15 minutes to touchdown for the rockets. All travelers on the first wave, please report to the staging area immediately. She even had less emotion in her voice than the base computer. Zan looked at me, her form wavering even worse than before, which I figured meant that she was crying harder now. I was crying myself. If you can't talk to me, I asked, can you at least keep an eye on me? Visit Earth now and then? No. To protect myself, I will have to cut all ties with Earth. I heard the pounding of footsteps outside the bathroom, and then Roddy, Cesar, and Camose burst through the door, and I could tell it was them from their voices and laughter. Obviously, they'd been sent to take a last toilet break before heading back to Earth. Cesar and Camose beat Roddy out and ducked into the stalls on either side of me. Ha ha! Cesar taunted. You lose! Roddy banged on the door to my stall. Dash, is that you in there? Yes. Stop hogging the toilet. I gotta go. I'm almost done. Come on, the rocket's almost here and it's 250,000 miles back to Earth. I looked to Zan. It was bad enough that she had to leave, but I hated to think that this would be one of her last memories of humanity. Hold on, I said, and then I stepped out of the stall. Roddy barely waited for me to clear the way before shoving past and slamming the door on me. I realized that, for all the time I just spent in the toilet stall, I hadn't actually gone myself. Zan had stepped out into the bathroom with me. It wasn't exactly private, though, with the three boys in the stalls. This wasn't the way I wanted to end things at all. Goodbye, Dashiell, Zan said. Wait, I can't. The time has come. Zan gazed at me sadly with her piercing blue eyes. Have a nice life, she said, and then she vanished for good.